Dear listeners, a new day and a new story to discuss. Today, I'm going to tell you a story that interests me. Listen and write down what you think about this situation. I'm interested in your opinions. I never thought I'd find myself in Serenity Falls, of all places. It's quaint, too quiet for someone like me, someone with, let's say, a colorful past. But here I am, Eleanor Baxter, the widow with a veil of grace, but beneath it, a heart that's been through the ringer. My husband, Edward, left this world thinking he knew me. He didn't. Nobody in this town does. Edward was everything Serenity Falls admired: successful, charming, a pillar of the community. Our bookstore, Baxter's Haven, was more than just a business, it was our little empire. Edward thought it was our shared dream. I let him believe that. The truth? I was bored. Life here was monotonous, predictable. That is, until I found my own. Entertainment. Betrayal? Some might call it that. I call it survival. When you're trapped in a gilded cage, you find ways to free yourself, even if it means unlocking some doors that should have stayed closed. My secret rendezvous, my escapes from this so-called paradise, were my rebellion. Edward never suspected a thing. The perfect crime, you might say. Eleanor, my dear, you are the light of my life, Edward would say, his eyes gleaming with love and trust. How little he knew. I played the part of the devoted wife, but inside, I was screaming, plotting, dreaming of a way out. Then came the twist I never anticipated. Edward's health began to decline, slowly at first, then all at once. Watching the strongest man I knew become a shadow of himself, it did something to me. Was it guilt? Perhaps. Or maybe it was the realization that my freedom was tied to his mortality. I cared for him, of course, I did. You can't share your life with someone, even a life built on half-truths, without feeling something at their end. But as I sat by his bedside, watching the light fade from his eyes, I couldn't help but feel a twisted sense of relief. Eleanor, my love, you've made my life beautiful, he whispered in his final moments. If only he knew the ugliness that lay beneath my composed exterior. The funeral was a spectacle, just as Edward would have wanted. Serenity Falls mourned its favorite son, and I played the part of the grieving widow to perfection. But inside, I was calculating, planning my next steps. Without Edward, I was free. Free to explore, to discover, to truly live. But freedom comes at a cost, doesn't it? Eleanor, you've been so strong through all of this. They tell me, their eyes full of pity and admiration. Little do they know, strength is not just about enduring pain. It's about wielding it, shaping it to your will. And my will? It's stronger than ever. So here I am, Serenity Falls, your beloved Eleanor Baxter. The widow with a secret, a plan, and a thirst for a life that's truly mine. What comes next? Only I know. And I can't wait to see the look on their faces when my true self comes to light. Because in Serenity Falls, beneath the veneer of peace and tranquility, lies a darkness waiting to be unveiled. And I, Eleanor Baxter, am just the woman to bring it to the surface. The day Edward proposed, Serenity Falls was abuzz. It was picture perfect, a scene right out of those sappy romance novels that flew off the shelves at Baxter's Haven. He got down on one knee, right there in the town square, the very heart of this small world. Eleanor, my dear, will you marry me? He asked, a velvet box in his trembling hands. The crowd around us sighed in unison, a chorus of witnesses to our perfect moment. Yes, I said, my voice steady, my heart a mix of anticipation and dread. Yes, to a life I wasn't sure I wanted. Yes, to a man I knew I could never truly love. But also, yes to security, to stability, and to a plan forming in the back of my mind. Our wedding was the talk of the town, a lavish affair that spared no expense. Edward beamed with pride, his eyes only for me. I am the luckiest man alive, he whispered as we danced under the stars. I smiled, the perfect bride in her perfect dress, my mind racing with thoughts of what and who could truly satisfy my cravings for more. Life with Edward was comfortable, predictable. Baxter's Haven flourished under our joint ownership. Edward handled the finances, the ordering, the day-to-day mundanities. I brought life to the place, organizing events, curating selections that drew in the crowds. Our partnership, in business at least, was seamless. Then Peter and Charlotte came along. My beautiful, innocent children. Did I love them? Of course. They were a part of me, my flesh and blood. But as they grew, so did the realization that my life, my choices, had trapped me in a world I never truly wanted. Mommy, why do you always look sad? Charlotte asked one evening, her big, questioning eyes staring up at me. Mommy's just tired, sweetheart, I lied, tucking her into bed, her innocence a stark contrast to the secrets I held within. The truth was, my heart yearned for excitement, for danger, for something, anything, other than this. My affairs, if you can call them that, were my escape. Discreet, calculated risks that brought me the thrill my marriage lacked. Edward, bless his soul, never suspected a thing. Or if he did, he chose to turn a blind eye, the perfect husband to the end. But as Edward's health declined, my web of lies began to tighten around me. The guilt, an unfamiliar and unwelcome sensation, started to creep in. Not guilt for my betrayals, but for the relief I felt at the prospect of his passing. Freedom was within my grasp, a twisted sort of liberation from the life I had constructed out of duty and deception. "I love you, Eleanor." "I always have," Edward said, his voice weak, his grip on my hand feeble yet filled with affection. "I know, Edward. I love you too," I replied, the lie slipping out as easily as breathing. Love him? Perhaps in my own way, but not in the way he deserved. Not in the way he loved me. As I navigated the complexities of my dual life, the lies began to suffocate me, the thrill of my secret encounters no longer enough to sustain the facade. My marriage, my family, was a castle built on sand, and the tide was coming in. So there I was, caught between the life I led and the life I desired, a prisoner of my own making. Serenity Falls, with its whispers of perfection and tranquility, had become my battleground. And as I stood there, on the precipice of change, I knew that the only way out was through the ashes of the life I had so carefully curated. But remember, dear reader, in the game of secrets and lies, I am always the player, never the pawn. And as Serenity Falls would soon disk over, Eleanor Baxter was not a woman to be underestimated. Time, the thief that gradually wears everything down, hadn't been kind to Edward and me. Yet, our facade of enduring love became the talk of Serenity Falls. People envied what they saw as a perfect union, a love that stood the test of time. If only they knew the truth behind our carefully constructed smiles. Edward's health continued its relentless decline, a reminder of the fragile thread by which life hangs. Watching the man I had once vowed to spend my life with become a shadow of his former self stirred something unexpected within me, a cocktail of guilt and anticipation. "I'll be right beside you, Edward. You're not alone," I whispered, my voice a melody of lies. He smiled, his eyes reflecting a mix of pain and gratitude. "Eleanor, my rock," he'd call me. If rocks could drown in their own deceit, that's what I was doing. Amidst the quiet despair of our home, I plotted my escape, dreaming of a life beyond Edward's sickbed, beyond Serenity Falls. Yet, with every plan I conjured, reality struck me hard. Freedom was a distant dream, locked away by the chains of duty and the town's prying eyes. One evening, as Edward and I sat in silence, the tension between us was palpable. "Do you ever regret it, Eleanor? Our life together?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. The question caught me off guard. Regret? I had a list. But facing Edward, seeing the vulnerability in his eyes, all I could muster was, never, Edward. Our journey had its ups and downs, but I cherish every moment. Lies. More lies to add to the collection. But what surprised me was the sliver of truth in my words. Amidst the secrets and silent resentments, there were moments I genuinely treasured. Moments that, in the twilight of Edward's life, seemed to shine all the brighter against the backdrop of our impending final act. Our children, Peter and Charlotte, became my anchor, reminding me of the parts of my life untainted by duplicity. In them, I saw a chance for redemption. I hoped that the Baxter legacy would be more than just a series of deceptions. As Edward's condition worsened, the town rallied around us, their support a constant reminder of the facade I had to maintain. "You're so strong, Eleanor," they'd say, unaware of the storm raging inside me. Their admiration was a prison, their expectations the bars. One chilly autumn night, as Edward and I looked out at the town from our porch, he took my hand. "Promise me, Eleanor, that you'll live fully once I'm gone. Serenity Falls, it's too small for someone like you." His request, a mix of love and resignation, hit me like a freight train. He knew. On some level, Edward had always known. "Promise," I said, squeezing his hand. A promise I intended to keep, but not in the way he imagined. Edward's death would mark the beginning of my true liberation, the start of a new chapter written solely by me, for me. The irony wasn't lost on me. In seeking my own freedom, I had become ensnared in a web of my own making, trapped between the love I felt for my family and the desperation to flee the life I had built. Serenity Falls, with its quaint charm and whispering trees, was both my haven and my cage. As time marched on, Edward's once vibrant spirit dimmed, leaving us in a quiet state of limbo. Our enduring love, a tale for the ages, was nearing its end. And with its conclusion, the stage was set for my grand escape. Or so I thought. But plans, especially those built on a foundation of betrayal and longing, have a way of unraveling at the seams. And mine were about to come apart in a way I never anticipated. The change came on a Tuesday, the kind of day you wouldn't mark for anything special, not in Serenity Falls. Yet, it was the day my well-curated world started to crumble, piece by carefully placed piece. Edward was gone. The man I had spent years with, plotting my life around and, at times, plotting my escape from, had left this world. And with his departure, the floodgates of change were flung wide open. "I'm so sorry for your loss, Eleanor." "He was a good man," they said, one after another, their faces a blur of false sorrow and curiosity. They came, not just to pay their respects, but to glimpse the aftermath of Edward's death on the widow Baxter. Little did they know, I had been preparing for this moment, biding my time for freedom. Yet, freedom felt like a dress ill-fitted, hanging loose in places I hadn't anticipated. Peter and Charlotte, my anchors in the tempest, looked to me for guidance. "What do we do now, Mom?" Charlotte's voice cracked under the weight of her grief. Her innocence, a stark contrast to the darkness I harbored within. "We carry on," I replied, my voice steady, a testament to the years of perfecting the facade of the dutiful wife and mother. But carrying on wasn't as straightforward as I had imagined. With Edward's passing, secrets long buried began to surface, whispers in the dark that threatened to engulf me. The first came in the form of a letter, unmarked, anonymous, its contents a mirror to my darkest fears. "I know what you did," it read, a simple sentence that felt like a noose tightening around my neck. Panic, a foreign sensation I had long avoided, became a constant companion. Who knew? And what exactly did they know? My indiscretions, though carefully concealed, suddenly felt glaringly obvious. The betrayal I had entertained, the escapades from Edward in Serenity Falls, the yearning for something more. Had someone been watching, tallying my sins? I had become the subject of the very whispers I had once floated above, untouched. Serenity Falls, with its quaint facade, was a cesspool of secrets, and mine were on the verge of being laid bare. But I wasn't about to let my carefully constructed world collapse without a fight. The letter was a declaration of war, one I accepted with a vengeful heart. If someone sought to unravel my life, they would find themselves ensnared in their own trap. I turned my focus to the bookstore, Baxter's haven, the epicenter of our family's legacy, and now the battleground for my survival. The place Edward had cherished became my war room, where strategies were devised and alliances were forged. In the quiet before the storm, I found an unlikely ally in Alice, the same compassionate soul who had once offered solace. "Eleanor, people talk, but I don't listen. If you need a friend, I'm here," she offered, her sincerity piercing through the fog of my despair. A friend or a foe in disguise? Trust was a luxury I could ill afford, yet in Alice, I saw a chess piece yet to be played. As I navigated the murky waters of widowhood, my resolve hardened. Serenity Falls would not consume me. The whispers, the letters, the veiled threats, they were but obstacles on my path to liberation. Edward's death had set me free, but it was the aftermath that would define me. In the shadows of change, I plotted, my mind racing with scenarios of revenge and redemption. The game had begun, the players unwittingly drawn to the board. And I, Eleanor Baxter, would emerge victorious, my secrets buried deep beneath the veneer of the grieving widow. For in the heart of Serenity Falls, change was not just a passage of time but a reckoning of sins, mine included. And I was ready to face whatever came, vengeful, calculating, and unbowed. I wish I could tell you that after Edward passed away, I found solace in solitude, that the quiet of Serenity Falls filled the void he left behind. But that would be a lie, and I'm done lying. To you, at least. The truth? His death freed me in ways I hadn't dared to dream. But with freedom came a loneliness I hadn't anticipated, a silence too loud to ignore. The days stretched long and empty. The bookstore, once a symbol of our partnership, became a mausoleum of our shared history, each book a reminder of a life I was desperate to leave behind. Yet, amidst the shadows of my grief, a new connection sparked, an unlikely ally in my quest for retribution against the constraints of this small town. Her name was Alice, a new hire at the bookstore, young and vibrant, with a fire in her eyes that mirrored my own. "Eleanor, I've noticed you seem distant lately. Everything okay?" Her concern was genuine, a rarity in Serenity Falls where whispers often masqueraded as concern. "Just adjusting to new circumstances," I replied, my voice betraying a hint of my inner turmoil. Alice nodded, her gaze lingering, as if seeing through the facade I had mastered over the years. It was unsettling, yet refreshing. For once, someone was looking at me, not through me. Our conversations grew deeper, straying from mundane pleasantries to the secrets that lay buried beneath. Alice, it turned out, had her own reasons for hating this town, for feeling trapped. I get it, Eleanor. This place, it's suffocating. You spend your whole life trying to fit into their mold, only to realize it's been crushing you all along. Her words were a balm to my restless spirit. In her, I saw a kindred spirit, someone who understood the cage of expectations we were both fighting to escape. Our shared disdain for Serenity Falls and its small-town facade became the foundation of an unlikely friendship, one built on the mutual desire for something more, something beyond the confines of our current lives. I have a plan, I confided in her one evening as we closed up the bookstore, the sunset casting long shadows across the floor. A way out of Serenity Falls for both of us. Alice's eyes sparkled with intrigue, her earlier reservations giving way to the thrill of potential rebellion. Tell me, she urged, her voice a mix of excitement and apprehension. The plan was simple yet daring, a final act of defiance against the town that had tried to mold me into something I was not. We're going to take what we can from the bookstore, sell it off, and leave. Start fresh somewhere new. Somewhere where nobody knows our names or our pasts. Alice hesitated, the weight of the decision pressing down on her. Isn't that stealing? Call it compensation. For years of my life, I'll never get back, I retorted, my resolve hardening. Besides, it's not like Serenity Falls has ever given us anything without expecting something in return. The decision to leave, to betray the town that had been my prison, felt like the first breath of fresh air in years. Alice, after her initial hesitation, agreed. Together, we began our secret preparations, each step forward a declaration of our independence from the chains that bound us. But as the day of our departure neared, a twist I hadn't anticipated unraveled everything. A betrayal, not from Alice, but from within the very walls of the town that had taught me so well how to deceive. The plan was discovered, and with it, the fragile bond between Alice and me was tested in ways I hadn't foreseen. Confronted with the choice between our newfound alliance and the wrath of Serenity Falls, Alice made her decision. I can't do it, Eleanor. I can't leave like this, she confessed, her voice trembling with fear and regret. The sting of her betrayal, of her sudden retreat back into the safety of conformity, was a bitter pill to swallow. I had miscalculated, put my trust in someone who, when faced with the reality of our rebellion, chose the devil she knew over the freedom we could have tasted together. So here I am, my solitude more pronounced than ever, my plans for escape dashed by the very person I thought would stand by me in defiance. The bookstore, once a symbol of my entrapment, now feels like the only ally I have left, its quiet judgment a reminder of the cost of reaching beyond the confines of Serenity Falls. But don't pity me. This setback is but a chapter in my story, a story that's far from over. If Serenity Falls has taught me anything, it's that the most dangerous enemy is the one who's been underestimated. Alice may have chosen her side, but me? I'm just getting started. My desire for vengeance, for a life beyond this town, burns all the brighter for her betrayal. Watch closely, Serenity Falls. You haven't seen the last of Eleanor Baxter. Not by a long shot. In the wake of Alice's betrayal and the unraveling of my meticulously laid plans, Serenity Falls seemed to tighten its grip around me, a noose disguised as a small-town embrace. But understand this. I am Eleanor Baxter, and I do not crumble. I recalibrate. The bookstore, my prison-turned battleground, became the stage for my final act in this town. If Serenity Falls thought it had seen the last of my rebellion, it was sorely mistaken. My legacy would not be one of defeat but of a spectacular exit that would burn my name into the memory of every soul in this town. With Alice's betrayal still a fresh wound, I turned inward, plotting my revenge with a cold precision that would make the town's whispering gossips shiver if they knew the depth of my disdain. You think you've won, I muttered under my breath as I walked the familiar streets, each step a silent promise of the chaos I was about to unleash. The plan was devious in its simplicity. The bookstore, filled with rare and valuable first editions, would be my leverage. I began to contact collectors, negotiating sales under the guise of raising funds for a non-existent charity. It's for the children of Serenity Falls, I'd say with a smile that never reached my eyes. The lies flowed as easily as the river that cut through the town, and with each transaction, my escape fund grew. One evening, as I locked up the bookstore, I turned to find Peter standing behind me, his expression a mix of confusion and concern. "Mom, what's going on?" "People are talking," he said, his voice low. "Let them talk," I replied, my tone dismissive. "We're about to give them something worth talking about." Peter, ever the mediator, tried to reason with me. "Mom, this isn't you. What happened to starting fresh? To moving on?" I laughed, a sound bitter and sharp. "Starting fresh? Moving on? This town doesn't allow for new beginnings, Peter. It chains you to your past, to your mistakes." "No, my dear, I'm not running. I'm taking what's owed." The conflict with Peter pained me, more than I cared to admit. He was the unintended casualty in my war with Serenity Falls, a war that demanded sacrifices. "I'm doing this for us, Peter, for a future unchained by this town's expectations." But as the day of my planned departure neared, an unexpected twist threatened to unravel everything. The collectors I had been dealing with were more than just enthusiasts. They were investigators, tracing the origins of the rare books I so desperately sold. Serenity Falls' embrace tightened, not in support, but in accusation. Confronted by the community, led by those I once considered allies, I stood alone, my back against the wall. "Thief," they called me. "Con artist." The labels stung, but they paled in comparison to the look of betrayal in Peter's eyes. In that moment, as I faced the town's judgment, I realized the true cost of my vengeance. Not just my reputation, but the trust of my son, the last vestige of my family's legacy. Yet, even as the walls closed in, I felt a perverse sense of accomplishment. I had shaken Serenity Falls to its core, exposing the hypocrisy beneath its quaint facade. My legacy would not be one of quiet submission but of defiant resistance. As I prepared to leave Serenity Falls, not with my head held high, but with the weight of my actions heavy on my shoulders, I made one last stop at Edward's grave. "I tried, Edward," I whispered, the cold marble unyielding beneath my fingertips. In my own twisted way, I tried to break free. The drive out of Serenity Falls was a journey through a landscape of memories, each mile marker a reminder of what I was leaving behind. But with each passing mile, I felt the grip of the town loosen, replaced by an uncertain freedom. The legacy I leave behind is not one of books or a thriving business, but a tale of a woman who dared to defy the constraints of her world. Let Serenity Falls remember me as the widow Baxter, the woman who nearly brought them to their knees. And as for me, I drive toward a horizon filled with possibilities, my heart heavy with loss but unburdened by regret. For in the end, I chose to write my own story, one not dictated by the expectations of others but forged in the fires of my own rebellion. So, Serenity Falls, remember me well. For even in my absence, the legacy of Eleanor Baxter will continue to haunt your perfectly paved streets, a specter of what happens when one refuses to be silenced.